قسما بالله ثواني من الخيال هتشوف عندي اللي مش هتشوفه عند حد.
Along the fading banks of the Euphrates River, a discovery has emerged that is stirring debate across the scientific world. A massive buried vessel with sealed chambers and traces of pitch, pointing to deliberate and large-scale construction. Within its protected recesses lay a carefully arranged cache of clay statues, suggesting sacred objects were stored rather than abandoned. Deeper inside, complex layered lock mechanisms reinforced inner sections of the structure, implying that whatever was kept there was meant to be secured with unusual strength and intention. What first appeared to be a simple geological survey of a drying riverbed quickly raised a far more serious question. Is this just an excavation, or is it evidence of something far more complex and troubling? Before we begin, like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and explore this discovery with us. Along the exposed banks of the Euphrates River, where falling water has revealed ground hidden for centuries, researchers identified a massive buried structure resting beneath layers of hardened earth. Its outline became visible only after long stretches of riverbed dried and cracked open. What caught attention first was its size. Measurements taken across the formation showed clear proportions, long, wide, and tall in a balanced ratio. Scanning technology revealed more. Instead of random layers of rock or broken sediment, internal imaging showed separated chambers inside the formation. The spaces were divided clearly, not crushed or chaotic. Natural mud flows usually leave uneven cavities and unstable gaps. Here, the interior looked ordered. Several compartments were spaced evenly, like sections meant to hold supplies or living quarters. Some wall surfaces appeared straight. A few angles came close to right corners, something rare in untouched natural formations shaped only by water and time. The pattern repeated with rhythm, suggesting planning rather than accident. Then came another detail. Parts of the inner walls were coated with a hardened black substance resembling ancient bitumen. In Mesopotamia, bitumen was widely used to waterproof boats. The Epic of Gilgamesh specifically mentions sealing Utnapishtim's vessel with pitch to make it watertight before the floodwaters came. Carved into sections of this hardened coating were symbols. They were not random scratches. The markings followed repeated shapes and lines. Early analysis suggests they belong to a very old writing tradition, possibly older than many later alphabet systems. The carvings appeared to have been made while the pitch was still soft, pressed in before it fully hardened. 3 repeated phrases have drawn attention during preliminary translation attempts. While interpretations remain debated, the tone feels direct, almost instructional. The language suggests sealing, protection, and warning. Researchers are careful with conclusions. They are not claiming this is the ship of Utnapishtim. They are not declaring it the direct source of later flood stories. But the parallels are difficult to ignore. The Euphrates is the heartland of the world described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It is where Utnapishtim's story was first written on clay tablets. Many historians consider that flood narrative a historical prototype, an early version that later influenced other traditions, including the story of Noah. What lies along the Euphrates today is not just a shape in the soil. It shows structure, order, sealing material consistent with ancient boat-building methods. Whether natural or built, the formation has reopened an old question, not only about floods, but about how one of humanity's oldest survival stories began along the banks of this river. At this stage, the evidence does not provide final proof, but it establishes one clear fact. What lies beneath the Euphrates cannot be dismissed as an ordinary geological accident. If the structure beneath the exposed banks of the Euphrates River was already unexpected, What researchers uncovered inside transformed the entire interpretation of the site. During careful excavation of several interior chambers, archaeologists began identifying clusters of clay figurines embedded within compacted sediment layers. These were not scattered fragments washed in by shifting water currents. The figures appeared deliberately grouped in defined sections, suggesting organized placement rather than random burial. As the layers were brushed back with precision tools, dozens of small statues emerged, human-shaped forms crafted from baked clay. Many displayed delicate facial features, elaborate headdresses, and stylized garments. Several figures bore iconographic traits long associated with the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna, the ancient Sumerian deity of love, war, and fertility. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the clay composition matched materials historically used in temple workshops across southern Mesopotamia. Residue testing detected traces of mineral-based pigments along some surfaces, indicating that the statues were once painted. The pigment patterns were not uniform. Certain figurines showed richer decorative elements, implying hierarchical symbolism rather than mass production. Even more striking was the spatial arrangement. In multiple compartments, the figurines were positioned upright or carefully stacked side by side. Some chambers contained tightly grouped clusters of nearly identical forms, while others held mixed variations in size and detail. This separation suggests intentional categorization, possibly distinguishing between ritual roles, offerings, or ceremonial ranks. In several side chambers, archaeologists uncovered partially intact clay containers resting beneath layers of hardened silt. Inside these vessels were additional fragments of small statues, some broken but clearly crafted from the same clay source. The containers appeared placed within protected interior zones rather than randomly deposited. Their positioning supports the theory of deliberate storage. Microscopic examination of the clay surfaces revealed fine tool marks consistent with hand sculpting techniques documented in early Mesopotamian temple sites. Specialists noted that such preservation requires rapid burial, followed by stable, sealed conditions, circumstances consistent with sudden flooding and long-term sediment coverage along the Euphrates. Carbon residue analysis of organic traces found within the surrounding soil suggests the deposit dates back thousands of years, aligning with periods when worship of Inanna flourished in nearby city-states such as Uruk. While full chronological confirmation is still underway, the chemical profile does not resemble modern intrusion or recent contamination. The repeated grouping pattern strongly supports the hypothesis of a hidden cache rather than collapsed temple debris. If these statues had been swept away by erosion, they would likely appear fractured, scattered, and unevenly distributed. Instead, the figurines remain concentrated within defined compartments, protected from random displacement. Some scholars now suggest the site may represent a concealed storage chamber connected to an ancient temple complex dedicated to Inanna, possibly hidden during a time of conflict or environmental threat. Throughout Mesopotamian history, sacred objects were sometimes relocated to protect them from invasion or destruction. Skeptics caution that floodplain shifts can trap cultural artifacts inside natural cavities. However, the patterned clustering, preserved pigment traces, upright positioning, and containerized fragments reduce the likelihood of accidental deposition. The clay statues beneath the Euphrates are more than relics of devotion. They suggest preservation, intention, and urgency. Whoever placed them there did not discard them, they stored them. And as researchers continue their analysis, a deeper question grows louder. If this was a hidden temple cache, what event forced its guardians to conceal the sacred images beneath the river's future path? Stay with us, because the next discovery inside the chambers may be the most controversial of all. Within several interior chambers of the buried structure beneath the Euphrates floodplain, researchers uncovered a series of metal mechanisms preserved inside compacted sediment and mineral deposits. These were not scattered scraps or corroded fragments washed in by chance. The pieces appeared deliberately positioned, often grouped in consistent orientations, suggesting they once functioned as integrated components of a larger system. At first glance, the objects resembled heavily mineralized blocks of iron or bronze, but once carefully extracted and cleaned under laboratory conditions, their form became clearer. Each piece contained a hollow core with internal channels and movable elements, unmistakably mechanical in nature. Microscopic analysis revealed rotational wear patterns along inner surfaces, indicating repeated use rather than decorative purpose. When scanned using high-resolution imaging and digitally reconstructed through structural modeling software, the mechanisms revealed something even more unusual: lock assemblies, but unlike any known conventional design from the same historical period. Instead of simple pin tumbler or sliding bolt configurations typical of ancient Mesopotamian door systems, these locks contained layered internal barriers. Multiple interlocking plates sat within narrow chambers, arranged in sequential alignment. To disengage the mechanism, several internal elements would have needed to shift simultaneously. The spacing between components was extraordinarily tight, leaving minimal tolerance for error. Some locks featured elongated shafts extending deeper than expected for ordinary doors or containers. Others contained cross-channel pathways that appeared designed to prevent forced entry. In several specimens, the internal structure formed almost labyrinth-like pathways, complex enough to require precise coordination to unlock. The reinforcement patterns add further complexity. Pressure scoring along internal contact points suggests significant mechanical resistance. These were not lightweight latches intended for simple storage chests. The density of material and structural layering imply the locks were designed to secure something of considerable importance, or something requiring serious containment. Traces of pitch-like residue were discovered along external seams and connection edges. Chemical analysis indicates the substance was used as a sealing compound, possibly to prevent moisture intrusion or tampering. This aligns with ancient waterproofing and preservation techniques, yet its application to mechanical locking systems is rare in known archaeological contexts. Researchers compared the reconstructed models to documented locking systems from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia. Traditional ancient locks were relatively simple: wooden bolt systems with basic key inserts. In contrast, these mechanisms display multi-stage engagement features more consistent with advanced engineering principles. Notably, the locks were discovered within protected interior sections of the structure, not near obvious entryways. This positioning suggests they may have secured internal compartments rather than exterior doors. Their repeated presence across multiple chambers implies standardized production rather than isolated experimentation. No definitive purpose has been confirmed. The mechanisms do not align cleanly with known architectural locking practices from nearby settlements. Nor do they resemble common maritime fastening systems. Their complexity appears excessive for ordinary storage. Some researchers propose the locks may have secured restricted compartments, possibly safeguarding valuable items or sensitive materials. Others suggest a containment function, given the reinforced internal resistance patterns and multi-layered barriers. Importantly, metallurgical testing indicates long-term burial in oxygen-limited conditions, which contributed to the preservation of structural integrity despite corrosion. The consistent design features across separate specimens reinforce the conclusion that these were not random mechanical fragments. They were engineered, repeated, purposeful, and the question now intensifies: What required such an unusually intricate system of confinement inside a structure that was later buried and forgotten? At present, the seal frameworks remain one of the most puzzling elements of the site. They demonstrate deliberate construction, structural reinforcement, and repeated design patterns. However, without additional contextual evidence, their exact function remains unresolved. During extended interior scans of a smaller side chamber within the buried structure, researchers detected a solid rectangular mass embedded deep inside a sealed wall recess. Unlike loose debris or fragmented artifacts, and this object appeared singular and intact. Its edges showed straight lines beneath the sediment, immediately distinguishing it from surrounding stone formations. Careful micro-excavation revealed a large ancient stone slab, preserved in remarkable condition. The slab was positioned upright, as if intentionally placed rather than collapsed or washed in by flood movement. The surrounding sediment was compact and unusually stable, suggesting the chamber had remained sealed for an extended period. Once the surface was cleaned, carved imagery slowly emerged. At the upper section of the slab, researchers identified 4 distinct circular dots, evenly spaced and deeply engraved into the stone. The circles were not decorative imperfections. Each was carved with deliberate symmetry, forming a balanced arrangement that appears symbolically intentional. Below the 4 circles, a striking symbol became visible, the chi rho, one of the earliest known Christograms formed by the superimposition of the Greek letters chi and rho. The carving was precise and deeply incised, indicating confident craftsmanship. The proportions of the symbol suggest familiarity with early Christian iconography. Beneath these symbols, the lower half of the slab revealed a detailed relief carving of a battle scene. Figures armed with shields and spears appear locked in confrontation. Some warriors stand upright in defensive posture, while others fall beneath raised weapons. The composition is layered, showing overlapping forms that create movement and intensity. The battlefield imagery does not appear chaotic. The arrangement of figures follows directional flow, suggesting narrative intent rather than abstract decoration. One central figure stands slightly elevated compared to the others, positioned directly beneath the chi rho symbol, a placement researchers describe as unlikely to be accidental. Tool mark analysis indicates the carvings were executed in stages. The circular dots and chi rho symbol appear more deeply cut and refined, while the battle scene displays varied carving depths, possibly added in separate phases. This layering may suggest symbolic hierarchy, celestial or divine marking above, human conflict below. Microscopic surface testing confirms long-term mineral bonding consistent with centuries of burial. The stone's preservation was aided by oxygen-limited conditions within the sealed chamber. No evidence of recent tampering or modern carving has been detected. Scholars remain cautious in interpretation. The chi rho symbol became widely associated with early Christianity, following the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. However, the context of its placement inside a buried structure, alongside 4 carved circular marks and a battle depiction, raises complex historical questions. The 4 dots themselves remain unexplained. Some researchers suggest they could represent celestial bodies, directional markers, or symbolic seals. Others caution against premature interpretation. What is clear is this: the slab was not randomly deposited. It was placed, preserved, protected. Structural evidence suggests intentional burial. The carved imagery suggests message. And the combination of symbolic marking and warfare carved into stone introduces a powerful question. Was this a record of a conflict framed through faith, or a warning etched in permanence for those who would one day uncover it? Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and stay with us as we uncover what the next chamber reveals. Beyond the rooms that held the strange lock systems and preserved objects, researchers moved into a tight side chamber partly blocked by hardened earth. The space was narrow and sealed, as if it had been closed on purpose. Inside, the team uncovered broken skeletal remains locked inside layers of hardened mineral. The bones were not scattered across the floor like debris from a collapse or flood. They were grouped together, stacked along one side of the chamber in a controlled line. That detail mattered. In nature, when a body breaks down, especially in places touched by water or shifting ground, bones usually spread out. They separate, they move. But here, the fragments stayed aligned. Some were layered on top of each other, as if placed carefully rather than left by chance. When specialists examined the rib bones, they noticed something unusual. The ribs were set very close together, tighter than what is seen in most known land animals. If this creature breathed like mammals or reptiles, a lung expansion would have been limited. The rib cage looked compact, almost reinforced. The spine raised even more questions. Instead of forming a straight vertical line, several vertebrae showed a slight twist, almost a spiral pattern. Modern animals have straight spinal columns. Fossil records of large land species show the same linear structure. A spiral alignment is not something commonly documented. Comparative studies using global fossil databases found no clear match. The jaw fragments added to the mystery. The hinge area was wider than what is typical in reptiles, yet it lacked the tooth structure seen in mammals. Tooth marks preserved in nearby fragments showed uneven lengths, not clean, uniform rows. Density testing revealed that the bone was built to handle strong force. To understand more, researchers collected small samples for DNA testing. They expected damaged material, or at least partial matches to known species. Instead, the sequencing returned no clear alignment with mammals, reptiles, birds, or recognized prehistoric animals stored in international databases. The classification was marked simply as unknown. Unknown does not mean supernatural. It means current records offer no direct comparison. Time can damage genetic material and make identification difficult. Still, the lack of even partial matches stood out. As the study continued, some observers pointed to an ancient line from Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days. Science does not rely on scripture for identification, but the verse has long been linked to discussions about unusual beings described before the flood. The connection remains debated. What is certain is this: the bones were placed with intention. They were preserved. And whatever they once formed does not easily fit into what we already know. At present, the skeletal remains represent one of the most perplexing findings within the structure. The anatomical irregularities, deliberate arrangement, and lack of genetic matches demand further investigation. Until additional testing provides clearer classification, the identity of these remains remains unresolved. Deeper inside the structure, past the rooms that held bones and preserved objects, researchers reached a tight inner hallway. At the end of it stood something that stopped everyone in their tracks: a huge reinforced door set firmly into the stone. This was not like the other walls or dividers. Those looked practical, built to hold up weight or separate space. This door felt different, bigger, heavier, purposeful. It was made from thick layers of solid wood pressed tightly together. Across the surface ran wide metal bands, fixed both across and at angles, locking the wood in place. These were not decorations. They were there to strengthen it. The metal strips looked hand-forged and hammered down with force. Round, rivet-like marks showed where they had been driven deep into the timber. Then came the detail no one could ignore. The side of the door facing the corridor was covered in dents. Not small scratches, but deep, rounded impact marks. Hundreds of them. Most were clustered across the center and upper half of the door. The damage was not random. And more importantly, the dents pushed outward. When experts studied the wood fibers around each mark, they saw that the grain had been forced toward the hallway. That means the pressure came from behind the door, from inside the sealed chamber. If rocks or shifting earth had crushed it from the outside, the damage would press inward. But this door told a different story. Something had pushed against it from within. The frame around the doorway added to the tension. Thick wooden beams had been nailed diagonally across the structure, as if someone had rushed to brace it. These supports cut across the original layout of the corridor, suggesting they were added later, not part of the first design. Engineers at the site noted that such bracing is usually done to stop movement or hold something back, not simply to block water. Even the hinges carried signs of stress. The metal showed slight warping, and the wood around the hinge plates was darker than the rest, as if exposed to intense heat long ago. No final conclusion has been made about the source of that heat, but the seal appears permanent, not temporary. Researchers are careful with their words. Unusual damage does not prove extraordinary causes, but the facts remain clear. This door was reinforced in layers. It was struck repeatedly from the inside, and extra supports were added to keep it shut. Whatever stood behind it, the builders did not want it coming through. The reinforced door now stands as one of the most debated features of the entire site. It speaks of urgency, of pressure, of containment. Stay with us, because what lay beyond this door may be the most controversial discovery of all. Excavation inside several small side spaces of the structure uncovered clear signs of human presence. Among the strongest pieces of evidence were ancient clay jars placed inside shallow wall niches. These jars were not thrown around by chance. They were set into protected corners, partly shielded from falling debris and heavy soil. The jars were found in different conditions. Some still held their shape, with curved bodies and visible rims. Others were broken, but the pieces fit back together like a puzzle. Early inspection suggests they were shaped by hand, not made on a fast pottery wheel. The surface texture shows uneven pressure marks, a sign of early, simple crafting methods. Inside several jars, researchers found hardened residue stuck to the inner walls. Tests are now underway to determine what they once held: food, oil, water, or something else. What is clear is this: these were working containers. They were used, not made for display. Near the jars, the team also found simple tools. There were sharpened stones, small chisel-like pieces, and bits of carved wood that may have served as handles. The tools show clear wear. Edges are smoothed from repeated use. Fine scratch lines on the stone suggest cutting or scraping work. These were not ceremonial objects, they were working tools. The fact that jars and tools were found together in the same chamber suggests activity happened here. People did not simply pass through, they worked. This raises important questions. Were these items left behind when the structure was still in use, or did people enter the site later, long after it was buried, and use it for their own purposes? Dating the pottery is now a key step. The shape, clay mixture, and firing style can help narrow down the time period. Experts are comparing these jars with known pottery styles from nearby ancient cultures. If strong matches are found, it could help place human activity at a specific point in history. Several explanations are being considered. The jars may have stored food or water. They may have held supplies for long stays inside the structure. Another idea is that the space had ritual meaning later on, and the items were used for symbolic acts. A simpler theory suggests maintenance work, tools used to repair or modify parts of the structure while it was still standing. What these discoveries do not do is prove a specific story. Human tools alone cannot confirm the structure's full identity, but they do prove something important. This was not just stone and soil shaped by nature. People were here. They placed these jars. They used these tools. They left marks of intention inside a space that was meant to be closed off. Whether these objects represent original occupants, later visitors, or preservation efforts remains under investigation. What is clear is that the presence of crafted artifacts shifts the discussion from natural formation toward structured human interaction. As reports about the falling water levels of the Euphrates River spread, global attention followed quickly. News outlets, history channels, and religious platforms began focusing not on a single structure, but on the river itself. Images of dry riverbeds, exposed ruins, and shrinking currents moved across screens worldwide. But the deeper discussion was not only about drought, it was about Genesis. In the book of Genesis, the Euphrates is not a random river. It is named directly. In Genesis 2:10-14, the Euphrates is listed as one of the 4 rivers flowing out of Eden. That single detail gives it weight, how the river is tied to beginnings, to the origin story of humanity. For many, that changes how they see what is happening today. Online discussions grew fast. Some viewers saw the drying river as symbolic, a shift connected to ancient words. Others pushed back, urging caution. They reminded audiences that rivers rise and fall through climate cycles, dams, and human use. They called for data, not emotion. Scientists entered the conversation as well. Hydrologists pointed to reduced rainfall, high upstream dam systems, and long-term environmental stress. They explained how major rivers can weaken over time when natural flow is disrupted. From their perspective, the Euphrates shrinking is serious, but not mystical. Yet the debate did not fade. In Genesis, the Euphrates marks a boundary. It defines land. It shapes early civilization. It stands as one of the first geographic names in the Bible. That gives it narrative power. When a river tied to the beginning appears to weaken, some interpret that as symbolic, not just environmental. Skeptics warn about projection. They argue that once a place is connected to Scripture, people may attach meaning to normal events. Drought becomes a sign. Exposure becomes a message. They caution against reading intention into natural cycles. At the same time, faith communities reflect on the role of rivers in biblical language. In Scripture, rivers often represent life, movement, and blessing. When they flow, nations grow. When they dry, something shifts. The Euphrates especially carries ancient weight because it appears at the very start of the biblical story. Political voices have also joined the discussion. The river crosses modern borders: Turkey, Syria, Iraq. Water levels affect farming, power supply, and daily survival. For governments, the issue is practical and urgent. For believers, it can feel symbolic and historic. Researchers studying the region maintain a careful tone. They focus on measurable data, rainfall trends, soil exposure, archaeological impact. They do not claim prophetic meaning, but they acknowledge the cultural force of the river's name. Right now, the global response is mixed. Some see climate crisis. Others see biblical echo. Some call for environmental reform. Others call for spiritual reflection. What cannot be denied is this: the Euphrates is not just any river in Genesis. It is one of the first named places in the story of humanity. And when a river tied to beginnings begins to fade, people naturally ask what it means. Whether viewed through science, faith, or history, the Euphrates continues to shape conversation, just as it has for thousands of years. If you've followed this investigation from the beginning, let us know your thoughts below. Like this video, share your perspective in the comments, subscribe for updates, and thank you for exploring this extraordinary story with us. For centuries, the Euphrates River has been at the heart of biblical prophecy, its waters holding secrets of the past and warnings for the future. But now, during a recent environmental survey, an AI-powered drone was deployed beneath a newly exposed section of riverbed. What it recorded was not just erosion, but shocking findings that may confirm one of the most chilling prophecies in the book of Revelation. Whether this is coincidence, archaeology, or something more, the timing has raised questions few expected to ask. Before we begin, please click that like button and subscribe so more people can uncover the truth behind this chilling revelation. Thank you so much. As the mighty Euphrates River continues to dry up, eerie and unexplainable reports have emerged from the region, strange, yet otherworldly sounds echoing from beneath the ground. These sounds, recorded and shared on social media, have captivated and unsettled audiences worldwide. In various videos, locals stand near the dry riverbed, straining to capture the unsettling noises on their devices. The sounds range from deep, guttural growls to piercing, sorrowful wails, with some even describing them as eerie whispers, as if voices from an unseen realm are trying to communicate with the living. What could be the source of these chilling noises? Theories abound. Many believers turn to biblical prophecies, recalling that the book of Revelation speaks of 4 fallen angels bound at the Euphrates, awaiting their release at the appointed time. Could it be that these spirits, shackled beneath the river for millennia, are now stirring as the water recedes? Are we hearing the echoes of their ancient chains loosening? Some speculate that these sounds could be linked to UFOs or otherworldly beings. Could underground chambers near the river be harboring something beyond human understanding? With increasing global interest in extraterrestrial phenomena, some suggest that the sounds could be linked to hidden alien activity beneath the Earth's surface. Another theory posits that these noises are the groans of the Earth itself, shifting as underground caverns collapse. Given the rapid environmental changes and geological shifts in the region, it's possible that the retreating water has created massive voids beneath the ground, which are now shifting, producing unsettling sounds. A chilling possibility that many believers fear is that these noises are not merely natural or coincidental. Some have compared the eerie reverberations to the trumpet sounds mentioned in various prophetic scriptures, warning of divine judgment. In biblical prophecy, trumpet blasts often signal great events, warnings from heaven that the end times are drawing near. Could these sounds be part of that apocalyptic warning? However, the most compelling theory among believers is that these sounds are evidence of fallen angels awakening beneath the Euphrates. Could it be that these spirits, mentioned in biblical texts, are now stirring as the river recedes, just as prophesied? As researchers continued to explore the exposed riverbed of the drying Euphrates River, they stumbled upon a shocking discovery: an enormous skeletal structure resembling that of a colossal serpent. The sheer size and length of the bones defied all known species, leading to immediate speculation about its origins. Some scientists theorize that it could be the remains of a prehistoric species yet to be identified, while others question whether it belongs to a long-extinct giant serpent from an era long forgotten. One theory suggests that this could be the preserved remains of an ancient species that thrived thousands of years ago when the Euphrates was a much different environment. Nevertheless, another more alarming theory ties this discovery to biblical prophecy. Snakes have long been associated with deception, evil, and chaos, symbolizing the presence of dark forces. The book of Genesis describes the serpent as the instrument of Satan in the Garden of Eden. The book of Revelation warns of the great dragon, Satan himself, who will deceive nations. Could this serpent's remains be a direct sign pointing toward prophetic fulfillment? The drying of the Euphrates has already been linked to the end times by many biblical scholars, and now, with this eerie discovery, some fear that something even more sinister is unfolding before our eyes. Is this a warning from heaven? Why did the skeleton of a giant snake appear in the Euphrates River? The presence of this colossal serpent skeleton raises numerous questions. If this were simply an ancient species, why has no record of such a creature ever been found before? Some biblical scholars suggest that this may not be a coincidence. Throughout the Bible, the Euphrates River has long been associated with divine intervention and judgment, and serpents have played a crucial role in representing deception, sin, divine punishment, and even spiritual warfare. From the Garden of Eden to the apocalyptic visions in Revelation, snakes have been tied to the forces of evil and chaos. The discovery of a giant serpent skeleton in the Euphrates River may hold deeper symbolic significance, perhaps even pointing to a sign from God, one that demands our attention. Now, let's move on to another discovery on the other side of the Euphrates River, to see how this river connects to the Bible. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your thoughts matter, so feel free to share your opinions in the comments. The cavity narrowed, then widened again. The walls, once jagged and irregular, began to change. The drone's stabilizers corrected automatically as its sensors detected flatter surfaces ahead. The AI enhanced contrast, tracing edges in pale overlay lines. Straight edges, not curves, not fractures, lines that held their direction. The AI began cross-referencing surface patterns with known inscriptions. No confirmed match. The markings above the outline repeated 4 times, evenly spaced, carved with consistent depth. No mechanical fault detected. The drone hovered still. Low-frequency sensors registered a faint oscillation. 3 subtle pulses, followed by silence. It could have been shifting sediment. It could have been environmental interference. However, not all scholars believe this discovery is merely a scientific anomaly. Some religious historians and theologians see this as a sign, perhaps a manifestation of ancient biblical warnings. Could this be a remnant of the great creatures mentioned in ancient texts? Or does it point to something even more unsettling, a connection to the forces of darkness? The Bible presents a powerful narrative about fallen angels, celestial beings who once served God but rebelled and were cast out of heaven. These fallen angels now roam the earth, influencing humanity, and some are even imprisoned in supernatural locations, awaiting divine judgment. One of the most chilling biblical prophecies about these fallen beings is found in the book of Revelation, where it speaks of 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, "Loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the 3rd part of men. Revelation 9:14-15, KJV. This passage suggests that specific fallen angels have been kept in chains at the Euphrates River for a predetermined moment in history, when they will be released to unleash destruction upon the world. The idea of supernatural entities being bound and awaiting a time of judgment appears in multiple places in Scripture. Jude 1:6 also speaks of fallen angels kept in darkness. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. These references lead many to believe that the strange sounds heard from the Euphrates could be the cries of these imprisoned beings, stirring as the river recedes. Could it be that the fallen angels bound beneath the riverbed are awakening, their chains loosening as prophecy unfolds? Interestingly, the Euphrates River is also linked to another significant prophecy in Revelation, the rise of the kings of the East. Revelation 16:12 states, "And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the East might be prepared." Revelation 16:12, KJ 5. This passage is often interpreted as a prophecy that, in the last days, powerful forces from the east will rise and march toward a climactic battle. The drying of the Euphrates is not just a natural event, it is part of a divine plan allowing these armies to advance. Until this point, every explanation still had room to remain grounded. Buried architecture was not impossible along the Euphrates River. Entire settlements have vanished beneath shifting water lines throughout history. Flood, drought, collapse. These cycles have shaped the region once known as Mesopotamia for thousands of years. But a buried wall is one thing. A sealed chamber is another. The drone received new instructions. Approach the recess directly. Its rotors adjusted carefully, minimizing turbulence inside the narrow shaft. Dust and fine sediment settled slowly as the machine advanced. The camera feed sharpened automatically, compensating for low light. The recess filled the screen. Up close, the surface revealed more detail. The material was stone, not natural river rock, but shaped blocks fitted together with unnerving precision. The seams were tight. No obvious mortar, no collapse fractures. And the markings above the sealed section were clearer now. 4 identical symbols, positioned evenly across the upper span. They were not decorative flourishes. They did not flow like art. Each symbol appeared deliberate, repeated, measured, intentional. Their lines were shallow but controlled, carved with consistent depth. The AI isolated the shapes and attempted comparative analysis. No direct match. The system scanned databases of cuneiform, early Semitic inscriptions, regional tribal markers. It returned possibilities, partial similarities, but nothing definitive. Unclassified, the interface displayed. The drone angled slightly to the right, allowing its side-mounted scanner to sweep along the edges of the recess. The thermal imaging display shifted from grayscale to a faint blue-red gradient. Behind the stone barrier, the temperature difference was subtle, but real. There was space beyond it, a hollow cavity extending deeper than first mapped. Not a crack, not a fracture. A contained interior volume. One operator leaned forward. "Zoom the lower seam." The drone complied, lowering slowly toward the base of the sealed section. There, partially buried beneath hardened sediment, a faint horizontal indentation appeared, too straight to be erosion. It resembled the outline of a doorway, not open, not broken, closed, and not recently. The sediment packed around the lower edges suggested long-term burial. Layers had accumulated over decades, possibly centuries. Whatever stood behind that stone had not been exposed by modern water decline alone. It had been sealed first, then hidden. The low-frequency sensor activated again. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. The rhythm remained faint but detectable. Engineers debated whether it could be the drone's own feedback loop. A secondary system was activated to cross-check vibration sources. The pattern persisted. Not louder, not stronger, just steady. The drone extended a microprobe, an articulated sensor arm normally used to test structural stability. The tip hovered inches from the stone surface, careful not to make direct impact. A density scan ran across the sealed blocks. Results indicated uniform thickness. Too uniform. Natural sediment compaction produces variation. This surface showed measured consistency, as though cut or selected with purpose. The live 3D rendering on screen now displayed the full chamber outline based on sonar mapping. Rectangular base, slightly curved ceiling, depth extending several meters back. No secondary exits detected. No visible collapse from above. A contained room. Deliberately enclosed. Silence filled the monitoring tent. Someone finally spoke. Why seal something this deep? No one answered. The Euphrates has witnessed countless civilizations, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians. Temples were built. Vaults were constructed. Sacred objects were hidden during invasions. It would not be impossible for an ancient structure to lie beneath the riverbed. And yet, this location was unusual. It was not near known temple sites. It was not aligned with mapped ruins. It existed beneath what would have once been active river flow. Which raised another question. Was this structure built before the river shifted? Or was the river diverted over it? The drone's camera tilted upward toward the ceiling of the shaft. There, faint reinforcement lines appeared in the sediment layers, suggesting deliberate shaping of the cavity surrounding the sealed wall. Not just a room, a chamber placed within a protected pocket, as if whoever built it expected pressure, expected weight, expected concealment. The drone hovered motionless, its lights casting long shadows across the carved symbols. For a brief moment the signal flickered again. Not full loss, just distortion. Static crawled across the lower right corner of the display, then cleared. No alarms triggered, no system failures reported. But the atmosphere in the tent had changed. This was no longer an erosion survey. It was no longer a routine mapping mission. It was the documentation of something intentionally hidden beneath a river that is only now retreating. One technician quietly archived the feed under a new classification tag: subsurface structure, sealed. Outside, the exposed riverbed lay silent under the fading light. Wind moved across cracked earth where water once flowed freely. The Euphrates had covered this chamber for generations. Now the water was falling, and for the first time in perhaps centuries, something sealed behind shaped stone was illuminated again. The question was no longer whether the structure existed. The question was why it had been closed so completely, and what waited behind it. By now, the footage had been reviewed dozens of times. Engineers slowed it frame by frame. Analysts compared surface textures. Archaeologists were consulted quietly, without public statement. The sealed chamber beneath the Euphrates River was no longer just an environmental irregularity. It was becoming a historical question. But outside the technical discussions, another layer of conversation was beginning to form. The timing. For generations, this river has carried symbolic weight far beyond the geography. It has marked boundaries between empires. It has defined trade routes, conflicts, and migration. In religious tradition, it has also held meaning, not just as water, but as a dividing line between eras. Now the water is receding, not symbolically, physically. Satellite imagery confirms the decline. Long stretches of riverbed are exposed. Tributaries are thinner. Shorelines are shifting in ways not seen in modern records. Climate cycles and infrastructure decisions offer rational explanations, and yet the visual impact is undeniable. A river long associated with permanence is shrinking, and as it shrinks, something sealed beneath it appears. The drone footage was not released publicly at first. It circulated among researchers, then quietly reached independent analysts. Speculation followed, not because of what was proven, but because of what aligned. A river historically linked with turning points. A modern technological eye descending where human access was impossible. A chamber that appears intentionally closed, and all of it happening during a period when global uncertainty already feels heightened. No one in the research team made prophetic claims. No official statement suggested supernatural interpretation. The working language remained measured. Subsurface anomaly, possible man-made structure, further excavation required. But outside official language, questions multiplied. Why here? Why sealed? Why only visible now? Throughout history, rivers have hidden more than sediment. They have buried cities, temples, vaults, and warnings. When water levels shift, forgotten chapters resurface. Archaeology often begins not with intention, but with exposure. Still, there is something unsettling about a barrier that was not broken by collapse, but preserved by concealment. If ancient builders sealed a chamber beneath this river, they did so knowing water would cover it. They relied on time and current to protect it. The structure was not meant to be easily found. And yet, it was not destroyed. It endured. Now, as the Euphrates retreats and artificial intelligence peers into spaces once unreachable, a boundary feels thinner, not between nations but between past and present. Technology is advancing faster than ever. Environmental change is accelerating. Hidden places are becoming visible. Archives are being digitized. Ruins are being mapped from space. Humanity has never had clearer sight into buried history, but greater visibility does not always bring clarity. Sometimes it raises deeper questions. The chamber remains sealed. No entry attempt has been made. No excavation tools have touched the surface. For now, observation is all that exists, and yet, the symbolism is difficult to ignore. A river long associated with thresholds is falling. A hidden structure is emerging, and modern eyes are watching closely. Perhaps it is nothing more than an undiscovered relic of a forgotten civilization, or perhaps it is a reminder that history does not disappear. It waits. And when the conditions shift, when water lowers, when light reaches deeper, when the moment is right, what was covered begins to show itself again. The question now is not whether the chamber exists. It is what humanity will choose to do next. By the fifth day, the site had grown quieter. Not abandoned, but controlled. Access to the immediate area along the exposed stretch of the Euphrates River was limited under the explanation of structural instability. Equipment tents were repositioned farther from the sinkhole. Data transfers were routed through secured channels. Officially, the investigation remained geological. Unofficially, it had become something else, and the drone was sent down once more. This time, not to discover, but to confirm. Its descent was slower, steadier, every sensor active. Every signal logged in duplicate. The sealed stone recess came into view again, unchanged. The carved markings remained faint but precise. The sediment at the base had not shifted, but the low-frequency reading returned. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. The waveform appeared again on screen, subtle, rhythmic, consistent. Engineers cross-checked for mechanical interference. Rotor speeds were altered. The drone powered down non-essential systems. The pattern persisted. It was not loud enough to suggest machinery, not strong enough to indicate collapse. But it was present. Some suggested distant seismic activity. Others proposed underground water movement adjusting to the river's decline. All explanations were plausible. Yet none explained the regularity. The drone extended its microprobe again, scanning the sealed surface at closer range than before. Density readings confirmed uniform composition. No cracks, no natural fractures indicating pressure from within. If something existed beyond that barrier, it was contained, and it had remained contained for a very long time.
Local researchers believe they have cracked a mystery surrounding an extraordinary discovery, and it's right off of our...
No! That's like untouched 2,000-year-old stuff.
Exactly.
Do you see that spider?
The problem.
Satellite data confirms the dramatic retreat of the Euphrates River. But the greater mystery is what the water revealed: a hollow chamber leading into an ancient tunnel network. Deep inside are not scattered ruins, but a carved temple. Archaeologists report that under ultraviolet light, symbols appear on the walls, depicting four winged figures marked with a chilling warning: guardians below must not be disturbed. Scholars say it is not only archaeology. Locals say what remains buried begins to emerge. If this place wasn't built for worship, but to store something until a specific time, how would we know when that time had come? Could that generation be ours? Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video so it can reach more people to join our discussion. As the Euphrates River keeps pulling back, long cracks spread across the dry riverbed. From the broken earth, something dark begins to show: the clear shape of a cave doorway cut straight into solid stone. At first, people thought it was only a trick of light in the dust. But the shadow did not move. It deepened. It formed an opening that led down beneath the river itself. Archaeologists stepped inside carefully, expecting to find broken pottery or small ruins. Instead, they walked into a massive underground chamber carved directly from the bedrock. Early carbon testing suggests parts of it may date back to around 2,800 BCE, making it one of the oldest known structures in the region. But this was no simple place of worship. The walls are covered with carvings of tall, human-like figures. Their arms and legs are thin and stretched. Their eyes look doubled, almost layered on top of each other. Coiled shapes like serpents rest on their heads like crowns. At a glance, they resemble images of the Anunnaki from ancient Mesopotamian stories, yet these figures feel darker, leaner, more threatening than sacred. One message carved into the stone stands out. Though worn by time, it can still be read. It carries a warning that has survived thousands of years. When the river pulls back, the eye of the buried one opens. For generations, local villagers have repeated similar words. Many refuse to go near the site. Some say the structure was never meant to be found. This has led researchers to ask a disturbing question: was this place built for worship, or to hold something inside? The book of Revelation speaks of 4 angels bound at the Euphrates until a chosen time. If that passage is symbolic, it is striking. If it is literal, it becomes far more serious. And now, as the river dries, the doorway stands open. When the excavation team finally broke through the last layer of packed stone and stepped into what seemed to be the temple's deepest room, they expected a shrine. Maybe a fallen altar or a place for offerings. What they found felt different. Not sacred, not welcoming. It felt designed. The chamber was carved from thick black basalt, a type of rock not found anywhere near the river. Tests suggested it had been brought from a distant volcanic region. The walls were smooth, too smooth, polished until they reflected light like dark glass. Yet, when touched, the stone felt unnaturally cold. Even after hours underground, the air inside the chamber stayed cooler than the burning desert above. At the center stood a sharp-edged stone altar, perfectly shaped, flanked by two tall pillars. Thin, metallic lines were fused into the stone itself. When magnets were placed near them, they reacted slightly, as if something conductive was hidden within. Careful measurements revealed something even stranger. The room's dimensions matched the Earth's axial precession cycle, roughly 26,000 years. The structure appeared to follow the movement of the heavens, not artistic balance. When sound frequencies near 110 Hz were played inside, the walls produced faint vibrations, as though the chamber answered back. In one corner, shallow channels carved into the floor guided liquid toward a central drain. Chemical tests showed high levels of iron, consistent with blood. The layout was not random. It was repeated, planned. Then came a discovery that changed the tone of the investigation. When ultraviolet light was swept across the northern wall, hidden markings began to glow. Symbols emerged in sharp blue lines, invisible to the naked eye. They formed the image of four winged beings, each figure bound at the wrists and ankles, encircled by rings of flame. The fire was carved in layered spirals, as if sealing them inside a burning boundary. Chains connected the four figures to a central point beneath the earth. The carvings were not decorative. They were instructional. On the same wall, relief images showed kneeling figures facing a horned shape rising from the ground. Above them was a circular star pattern unlike traditional Mesopotamian designs. Behind the altar, excavators uncovered a hidden stone sphere that emitted a faint magnetic field despite no visible power source. Embedded in a cracked wall panel was a stone tablet written in mixed script, part Sumerian, part Elamite, and part unknown. One sentence appeared 7 times, carved deeper than the rest. The watcher below must not be disturbed. On the reverse side, the Euphrates was shown splitting into 4 branches, circling a deep central pit. Each branch ended in symbols representing blood, fire, wind, and shadow. The Book of Revelation speaks of the great Euphrates River being dried up. It also describes angels bound until a specific hour. If those passages are symbolic, the similarity is striking. If they are literal, the meaning becomes heavier. Soon after the magnetic sphere was removed, equipment began to fail. Drones lost control within a short distance. GPS readings flickered. Ground radar returned distorted images, as if something beneath the chamber interfered with the signal. During the early hours of one morning, a recording device captured a deep, low-frequency sound, barely audible but steady. Hours later, the altar had shifted slightly from its original alignment. What began as a simple excavation has turned into something else entirely. Architecture, astronomy, ritual, and unexplained signals now meet beneath the drying bed of an ancient river. If this structure was built to honor something, it was unlike any known form of worship. But if it was built to hold something, then the most important question is no longer what was inside. It is whether it was meant to stay there. Roughly 3 weeks after the ritual mural inside the circular chamber had been fully recorded, a different kind of disturbance began to unfold. It was no longer about stone, symbols, or buried history. The disruption was modern, immediate, political. At the excavation site, engineers reported ongoing technical issues. Drones lost balance mid-flight. GPS units drifted several meters off position without warning. Satellite signals flickered, especially near the temple's central chamber. At first, specialists blamed the dense black basalt surrounding the structure. Magnetic minerals can interfere with electronics underground. That explanation seemed reasonable. But the pattern did not fade. It intensified. Ground-penetrating radar systems, operated by separate teams using different equipment, began returning conflicting depth readings. In several cases, The data appeared inverted, as if empty space registered as solid mass and solid stone appeared hollow. Calibration checks showed no clear fault. The anomalies repeated. Then, beyond the excavation site, another wave of reaction began, this time across international headlines. During a televised interview, Mike Huckabee spoke with Tucker Carlson and referenced the historical phrase describing land from the Nile to the Euphrates. The comment, framed in a theological and historical context, quickly spread across global media platforms. Within hours, officials and religious leaders across several Muslim-majority nations condemned the statement. Protests erupted in multiple cities. Government spokespeople described the phrase as provocative and destabilizing. Social media amplified the reaction, with commentators warning that such rhetoric could inflame already fragile tensions in the region. The coincidence was difficult to ignore. As the Euphrates River continued to recede, exposing an ancient chamber beneath its bed, political discourse once again circled around the very same river. What had been a remote archaeological story now intersected with geopolitics, faith, and territory. Some observers dismissed the timing as chance. Others noted how deeply symbolic the Euphrates remains in religious and historical imagination. It is not just a waterway. It has long represented a boundary, both physical and prophetic. At the site itself, tension rose quietly. Security presence increased. Access routes were restricted. Excavation reports were reviewed more carefully before release. Official statements emphasized scientific neutrality. Yet, beneath the surface, both in stone and in diplomacy, pressure was building. The radar anomalies continued. One technician described the readings as if something below was bending the signal. Another dismissed that interpretation as speculation. No clear cause was confirmed. Meanwhile, headlines focused on diplomatic fallout, emergency meetings, and calls for restraint. The phrase Nile to Euphrates moved from ancient scripture into modern debate. For many in the region, it carried historical wounds and fears of expansion. For others, it was a reference rooted in biblical narrative. Two worlds were now overlapping: an exposed chamber beneath a drying river, and a political storm rising above it. Whether coincidence or convergence, the timing sharpened every development. When ancient geography becomes part of modern rhetoric, interpretation grows heavier. The excavation had begun as a search for history. It was no longer only that. History is said to have begun in the Tigris-Euphrates basin. Some even believe it to be the location of the original Garden of Eden, or the ancient cradle of civilization in the Middle East. The Tigris and the Euphrates are born in modern Turkey, in the highlands where rain and snow are plentiful. The Euphrates is longer than the Tigris, flowing through Syria and Iraq to the head of the Gulf, where it joins the Tigris as the Shat A1 Arab. The Tigris has a greater total volume and flows directly from Turkey to Iraq, where it obtains additional flows from the Zagros Mountains of Iran. See map, page 25. The Tigris and the Euphrates lie in a transition zone between humid continental and desert climates. Like the Nile, they are exotic rivers, which derive their waters from outside the region through which they flow. The source of the Tigris/Euphrates system is in the highlands of eastern Anatolia, modern central Turkey, which receives large amounts of rain and snow. Most of the downstream region, modern Syria and Dardaraq, receives insufficient rainfall to sustain rain-fed agriculture, but the rivers convey surplus water to zones of deficit. Farming first developed in the more humid zones, but then moved to river valleys in the arid zone, where crops could be grown under cultivation with the benefit of irrigation. As early as the 4th millennium BC, agricultural settlements and basic irrigation networks were part of the Mesopotamian landscape. 6. The Sumerians and Babylonians used the water of the Euphrates, and documents from the time of Hammurabi, the Babylonian lawgiver, referred to maintenance of the irrigation systems. The Bible provides early history of conflict over water in the land of Canaan,